I'm Will Hedrick.
And I'm Jordan Schaffer.
And this is Dog Ears and Timestamps, a Witcher podcast. Witchercast with special returning guest Kenneth Garman.
Hey, how's it going?
If you've listened to the show for any period of time, you'll recognize Kenneth, or maybe not even recognize, but at least remember that he has been on some episodes for Game of Thrones and for Salem's Lot when we watched the movie.
Yeah, we talked about him when we went and saw the movie.
Oh, Dr. Sleep.
Thank you, Dr.
Sleep. Yeah, we went and saw it with him.
Yes. Yeah.
That was a good movie.
It was a good movie.
It was really good.
I don't think that the critics liked it, but...
Really?
Yeah, but, you know...
Did they not?
I
didn't look into it.
As far as I knew, it seemed like the critics were not fans. But, you know, we're critics now, so...
We're critics now. We have a publicized platform.
Yeah.
That's true.
So we're critics.
The critics loved it.
I want to vote on the Academy Awards. Where's my vote?
That's true.
I'm a member of the press now.
Have those already happened?
Huffpa.
Have the Academy Awards already happened?
No. The Golden Globes happened last night.
That's what I was thinking. I don't know what they are. I don't know any
it's the same thing. It's just less prestigious.
Yeah.
It's done by the Foreign Associated Press or whatever it is.
Is it HuffPA? Is that what I was talking about? Is HuffPA? Am I making up an acronym?
Is that
maybe.
for
I'm not sure.
Post? What are y'all doing? What is HuffPA? I've never heard of that.
Something Press Association.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm not
Film
sure.
Press Association. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like I think that the Golden Globes are put on by something like the foreign. I don't know. Whatever. Doesn't
Foreign
matter.
government.
Yeah, by the foreign government.
It's all a conspiracy.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we even talking about it?
Anyways, this is obviously the final episode for our coverage of the Netflix original series, The Witcher, adapted from the novel series of the same name, except in Polish generally.
Yeah, do you think that they cast for that show based on like the book descriptions or like the video game descriptions? Because I feel like the video games have a lot more weight with like what they decided characters look like. So probably people that have picked up the book after the video game, just like you, will like imagine characters to look similar to the games. And
I think it is more off of the book descriptions.
Really?
Because it's the source material. The games itself are also an adaptation.
I know, just everything online was like, look at, like, this was speculative. Who are they going to cast for what? So it was kind of like, we want so-and-so to be Yennefer, you know, and so I was just thinking that maybe, and then I just saw a bunch of pictures of like the current actress that plays Yennefer side by side with the game adaptation to see like how similar they got, and I was just curious what you guys thought, I guess.
I could see that. I mean, it makes sense. Like, everyone's familiar with it. You know, they're trying to market it.
Yeah.
It may certainly have influenced some decisions, depending on who was even on, you know, the casting crew, though. Because if the people who cast it didn't play the games or didn't care to take stills of the characters from the games into their decisions, then, you know, that could or could not have influenced it. But I don't think that was their goal. Yeah, I don't think they were going into casting saying...
Yeah.
Maybe. It depends on who's on that casting crew, is the thing.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast earlier today when I was coming back from Harper, and they were talking with the lead writer and the... I don't think it was the director. I can't remember who it was. But they were talking about their approach to the series, and if they were, because the person he wasn't a director, maybe he was like a director of cinematography or something like that. He also did a lot of the direction for these cinematics in the games, and so they were asking him what it was that if that influenced him at all, and he and the writer said if it influenced at all, it was actually to push us in the opposite direction.
Oh, interesting.
Where we wanted this to be its own adaptation and not have to rely on the game's direction. And so by having his familiarity with how the games were done, they could then look at it and be like, well, this is how we did it in the games, so what if we try it this way instead?
Yeah.
You know, and what does that give us, and is that good or whatever? So I think that they were kind of, to whatever degree they could, actively trying to move away from the games.
Okay.
Or not trying to go down the same paths that that the games treaded, you know, as far as like direction goes.
Yeah. Nice. You haven't played the games, right, Kenneth?
No, I played like an hour into Witcher 2,
Okay.
And yeah, I didn't get that. That's where I stopped.
Yeah, and then haven't read the books. So
came in cold, just
yeah.
like Dr. Sleep.
Well, that's
I was shiny.
Well, that's one thing too. Why I think it's always cool, like to bring you in, is just like you're coming in with a fresh opinion. And Will and I had a lot of like thoughts about like the first few episodes or first few chunks of episodes, and like were they trying to cater to a new audience? Were they trying to cater to the old audience and bring in just like new people with like these new little tweaks and stuff that they've done? And how well did it translate? I mean, you said you binge watched it, so you did it all in like one go. Like, did that help with the storyline? Does like I don't know. It's just like all these different things that I guess don't really matter in the grand scheme of like, did you enjoy the story? Like, how did you understand it and stuff? But like, definitely it like affects me how I take it in. So I just stuff that I think about that might not necessarily matter, I guess, overall, but it's still interesting to me.
Yeah, and like you said, like I binge watched it when I first watched it, and I rewatched the first 2 episodes yesterday, and I realized it was a lot slower than I thought it was when I binge watched it. Like it takes a while to get anywhere, and I remember it was just one of those days where I just wanted to watch something, and it was the perfect thing because it started slow, but I was like, this is interesting. And I got into it, and I was like, I just kind of forgot how slow it started, The first 2 episodes, I felt were actually like pretty slow, and I don't know, it lent for me to like just binging. It was such a good show to binge, but it takes a while to get anywhere, I thought.
Yeah, Will and I just watched the first like 2 episodes for the like first episode of it, and I think that was one of the big things that we kept coming away with, is just like they spent a lot of time on this Yennefer backstory that we've never really gotten fully in the book so far. And then as far as like all the Geralt stuff, it's like different things from the short stories from the first 2 prequels. So it's like we're diving into this book, hopping around in stories that aren't necessarily part of the like
the greater saga.
Yeah, like the main plot. Like they are important because it shows you how he gets his character, and like Bill gets these nicknames of like the Butcher of Blaviken, and like just his history. It kind of shows you who he is, and Yennefer's character, it shows you like how desperate she was to have like a kid, even though that was the only way that she could become like beautiful, and it's just like, I don't know, it did feel like it was going really slow, I guess, is kind of what I was thinking. It felt like it was really slow in the beginning, and like I feel like once we got to the end, like that's when the main story like begins, and that's just weird. Like I feel like they did the show with the same intent that the author had when he was writing the book, which was like, I know there's going to be more, so why would I write it to be encapsulating an end in a nice sweet bow with a nice sweet bow? Like let's write it with this big ending that it's like Geralt and Ciri like basically do like the slow-mo run and hug, and then she's like, who's Yennefer? It's like, haven't you been watching? Like, it's just, I don't know. I didn't even know what she was going to say, because had they even met yet? Like, there had been so many jump arounds with the plot that it seemed like maybe they did meet at one point, but that wasn't the time that she could have been pulled as his like trophy for the Law of Surprise. And I know that,
well, by very nature of her birth, it's Law of Surprise. Like, she's always been destined for him.
Yeah, but he said he was going to come back in 6 years and check on her, at least in the book.
Well, because he never wanted to take possession of her. Because again, like we talked about a couple of episodes ago, I don't think that he was ever interested in actually having a child of surprise. He just invoked the Law of Surprise because that was the easiest thing for him to say, like, okay, fine, you owe me something. I'll take what you have but don't yet know that you have. That's just like an easy way to, because then you could end up with a dog, or he could have ended up with a cup, or just anything. And he didn't want, because he didn't care about, the fact that he had helped out Dooney, and was just like, yep, I just want to get out of here. I didn't want to be here to begin with. I don't want your debt. But Dooney was like, no, you have to let me give you something. You saved my life, blah, blah, blah. And then it just happened to be because it's destiny. Again, the overriding theme of this entire franchise. It ends up being a child. Yeah. And so then he's trying to weasel his way out of it and say, like, no, I don't want to actually take possession, but I'll come back and check on the child to make sure that it's okay, and blah, 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 blah. And that's why everybody's constantly also telling him, like, you can't avoid your destiny, Geralt. Yeah. Go get that girl, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, I don't believe in destiny. The constant fight that he has.
Yeah. I kind of thought that every time the Law of Surprise was brought up, it was always done kind of like, it's in my mind, the law of surprise is supposed to be like a very serious thing. And every time it gets brought up in this show, it's just like, well, I'll do the law of surprise. Like, I don't know. It just felt very like they just throw it around. Like, I get it. I get that it's easy, and I get that everybody knows it. Just kind of like how in Game of Thrones, everybody knows, like, if you like commit a crime, they can throw you to the wall instead of like putting you in prison forever. But it just, for how important it felt in the book, because it felt like something that was kind of tying destiny together, because it was so ambiguous, and it could have been anything. It could have been a dog or a cup or a child or $1 billion. You know, it could have been whatever. And it felt so ambiguous that, like, for the show, when they took it over, it just felt so like willy-nilly, and like there was always a joke afterwards to kind of take the seriousness out of it, and I just it always pulled me out of the story.
Can y'all like explain what the law of surprises is? Because I didn't understand that, and they kind of like show it, but like he says he wants to, like, the debt is the law of surprise or whatever, and then the girl's like, I'm pregnant, so then the baby's automatically his.
So the law of surprise is you will owe me something that you have but do not yet know that you have.
So there's the first thing that happens?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's
and so what happens where Dooney, the sort of hedgehog guy, gets to marry Pavetta is because whenever Pavetta's father, the king of Centra at that time, was out and about doing whatever it was that he was doing, he didn't realize that Queen Calanthe was already pregnant with Pavetta. And so when he returned home, that was the first thing that he found that was now his, that he did not yet know that he had.
And that's what seems to happen. Yeah, it seems like that happens a lot with the law of surprises. Like, people are off at war, they invoke that, and then they come back to find, like, okay, you got a kid. I mean, at least for this story, it feels like that happens.
Well, as a story beat, that happens because that's what is dramatic.
Right.
If it ended up being a cup, then they wouldn't mention it. Yeah, we wouldn't hear about it, exactly, which is the way that all storytelling goes.
So what constitutes a surprise? I was saying like a cup, but is it like if he buys a cup? That's not a surprise.
Well, that would be him knowing that he was getting it. If he had gone home and his wife was like, I made a cup for you.
Okay.
Or I bought this new horse to help us plow the fields. And like, okay, well now it belongs to Geralt because he invoked the law of surprise.
Gotcha.
But you can't call him either, so it's like, is he going to come by in 6 years? And then it's like, hey, this horse was the thing that... And if you lie, it'll mess with your destiny, and you'll be
it really depends on if
like,
you believe in destiny or not.
Yeah, gotcha.
I mean, whether you believe in it or not, it's going to come. Geralt like hates it. I mean, I guess he still believes in it, but he doesn't like accept it as something that he wants to believe. Like, he's constantly fighting destiny, but it always seems to hit him. So I guess I was wrong. He knows it and believes it.
But we never see a situation where destiny then lashes out because you tried to break it.
They've told of several situations that you can't go against destiny because...
That's just everybody saying, don't fuck with destiny.
Because something's happened, for sure.
Based on what I'm saying is they've never given us an example of that happening.
I could have sworn they've given us a rough example, like they loosely just sort of say, like, last time this happened, they got massacred.
Well, I think that it's always sort of in the same vein that do you or do you not believe in destiny in the real world? This sort of... If you talk to a religious person, they're always like, well, it's God's plan. It's like, okay, well, I can't explain whether or not it is God's plan because that's, supernatural bullshit that I can't, validate in any way. And in the same way, in the mythical world, in this world of The Witcher, if the immediate argument that you could suggest happens in the show is Geralt goes to then make sure that Ciri's okay because he hears that Nilfgaard is coming from the south and is Cintra's the next target. And he has, because again, he does and doesn't believe in destiny, but because he does believe in destiny in spite of himself, he doesn't want to put his destiny in danger by not protecting Cirilla, which is a thing that he's bound to. And then Calanthe is denying him his law of surprise miracle because she doesn't want to give up her grandchild, which is all that's left of her daughter that's dead. And so Cintra falls. But the Nilfgaardian army's coming anyways. It may have taken Cintra regardless of whether or not Calanthe got in the way of destiny.
Yeah. So you can explain it off either way.
Yeah, you can explain it off either way. There's never a point where like a god comes down and says, you didn't fulfill the rules of destiny and now your shit's toast. Is what I'm saying. There's never anything that's like, definitely, you denied destiny. Like the show, the game, and the novels never give any definitive answer to whether or not destiny exists either. They're constantly, everybody is talking about, whether or not it is. Some people believe in it pretty hard. Some people don't, or deny that they believe in it. That's the overarching conversation that's happening throughout the entire world is destiny real or not? And if it is real or not, does it matter that it's real or not?
Yeah.
And so I don't think that there really needs to be necessarily, and certainly depending on the characters involved in the scene, it doesn't have to be super serious because destiny is already an ambiguous idea in this world.
Yeah, I mean, every time they bring up destiny being something that like you can't get away from, or it being like important, it always seems to be like kind of focused at Calanthe. At least the two times I'm thinking of is like the first time it's like, hey, you can't deny him the right to marry your daughter. Like, haven't you heard of this, the law of surprise? And then she eventually gives him permission, and then thus breaking the curse and like fulfilling destiny or whatever. Then when she denies Cirilla to Geralt, she ends up saying like, no, go find Geralt of Rivia. He is your destiny or whatever. And then I feel like that makes it so Ciri can go. Like she I think embodies like that Citra hasn't fallen completely, like because she is the last one. So I don't know. I just like you said, you can argue either side. I feel like I'm arguing the side like for destiny. I guess,
you would be the person that believes in destiny in the same way that if you were talking to a Christian and you
don't
asked,
put it like that. That puts that because you just said that that's fake. So
well, from my perspective, because I'm a non-believer. But if you were talking to a believer in,
everybody believes in it a little bit. Everybody talks about it. You don't say like, I mean, you might talk about it, but you don't have any.
Okay, so not even Christianity then, but just spirituality in general.
There you go. You can do that.
Some form of a higher power. Yeah. I don't believe in any form of a higher power. Period.
Right.
But other people do, whether it's Christianity or Buddhism or whatever it may be, and they say, well, I prayed to my God, or I put out good vibes, or whatever their form of practice is, and that's why I was able to. And because I'm a devout follower of blank, that's why I was able to fight off my cancer.
Right.
And I would say, well, I mean, what if you didn't and you still fought off the cancer?
Yeah.
It's the same argument.
No, I guess all I mean is just they specifically show Calanthe making the conscious choice to then
because because the show is presenting to you the choice of do you believe or not.
But they're showing you how if she goes against it, it's failing. Like it was already failing because everybody was fighting to kill each other in her court. Like Geralt was there and he would have killed everybody there because he's the best fighter ever. Like he would have killed everybody in the court protecting this guy who had the law. Like it's just when she kind of stopped everything, it felt like she was making the choice to like redefine destiny. Same thing with Ciri. Like when she said like go to Geralt, he is your destiny. Then that redefined history so that Ciri actually wanted to leave and go find him. I feel like they wouldn't have shown us that had it not been that important. And then thus saying like destiny is real. You know what I mean? Like I know what you're saying, that like there are the two sides, the people that believe and don't believe, but like it seemed too perfect for me in my mind that they would show us both of those things with that one specific character, and then it's all kind of guiding the destiny and the fate of Cintra and Ciri and so forth. I don't know if that makes sense, but in my mind they showed us those things to kind of prove definitively like destiny is guiding this.
Yeah, and like the story wouldn't happen if that didn't happen.
Yeah,
like if she didn't make those choices, or if she did make the choice to kill the would-be husband, then it wouldn't have happened. Like you wouldn't have Cirilla, right?
Right.
And then I guess she did keep Cirilla from Geralt, but I don't know.
And that's why I feel like Cintra fell.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, aren't they all pretty powerful? Like, I mean, isn't she like I don't know. I'm just speculating, I guess. But
to change the subject, I was rewatching the last episode and I was catching up on little things, like Fringilla, which I think is the funniest name in the show.
Yeah.
She was the one that destroyed the ships in I don't remember the name of but whenever Cintra was going out to meet Nilfgaard, the ships were supposed to get there, but they got caught in a storm. But Fringilla was the one that destroyed them.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's cool.
That's
There's a lot of like small little things, like subtle things that maybe that's not that subtle, but like I didn't catch it when I watched it the first time, where they just kind of like one-off lines, like, oh, she was the one that did that.
right. Yeah, that stopped the backup from coming.
Yeah.
And then that specifically is to illustrate how far back the planning that Nilfgaard has been doing, because their whole idea is, okay, we're going to go north and we're going to take all these kingdoms and expand our empire.
Yeah.
And, it's just sort of like, and that's also a bit of a small beat and just a line that Fringilla just has to say to further incense us against her.
Yeah,
to be like, well, oh God, oh, she's the one who did that. We'll fuck her even more, because she's now the bad guy, and she's always got that half smirk and just is very sure of herself, and it's she's a kind of an archetype of a bad guy that we can root against, but it is always neat to go back and catch things that you didn't catch before.
Yeah, what did y'all think of how the first couple episodes were like following two different timelines? Where like Geralt was in the past, right?
Well, we've got 3 different timelines until episode 6, when Geralt and Yennefer finally meet up.
Was Yennefer on her own timeline, or was it?
Oh, she's far in the past.
Oh, okay.
Don't they meet in
I guess I didn't catch that, but
oh shoot, it's the genie.
Yeah,
Is that
the
that's
Jinn.
before.
That's either episode 5 or episode 6. I can't remember.
Yeah, either way.
But that's the first time that any of these 3 storylines coalesce. Is whenever Yennefer and Geralt. There's no hard numbers that are given to us, but we've decided that Yennefer is at least 60 years older than Geralt.
Oh wow, okay.
I didn't even realize she
catch
was
that at
older for a long, until Will and I talked about it later. And then I asked other people that watched the show, and they were like, "No, I caught that." And I was like, "How did you catch that?"
I didn't catch that.
Yeah.
At one point, she does say like she's lived many lifetimes, and
But
I
I
was
took, but that could mean anything.
Hey, I thought that meant she like suffered many life, or like
Exactly.
like she suffered so much it could have been lifetime.
I mean,
I think the
definitely-
context in that scene where she says that suggests that she's lived several lifetimes worth
Okay.
in time.
Yeah.
And then even between the two, like the several different stories that we get with Geralt, it's not like he goes from episode 1 to episode 2 and that's a week later. That could be 6-7 years later.
Yeah.
Because all of Geralt's stories that are presented to us in this first season are relatively inconsequential to the greater arc. It's just seeing him and learning about his character and his character's place in the world is the only reason that we're doing that.
Yeah.
I think that the problem with the storytelling and it being in the pacing of the show and the 3 different storylines that coalesce at different periods of time, I think the failure there is that because the books don't give the backstory of Yennefer. Just in very quick passing, we know that she goes to that magical school.
We know she's a hunchback and has some deformity.
Just small, brief things like, okay, this is stuff about Yennefer that informs her character a little bit, but we don't need to spend a ton of time there because our main character is Geralt. The books never really deviate from Geralt except for to jump to Ciri here to show whenever they're separated what it is that she's going through so that we can see why Geralt had to go to this place instead. Geralt is still the main character no matter what.
Yeah.
But because they wanted to create characters for Yennefer and Ciri that the audience can get behind for the show, they were like, well, now we have to come up with these backstories for them. Not come up with them, but
just expound
Flesh
it.
them out,
flesh out these stories that we kind of just generally know from the content, from the source material. Like the Cirilla stuff, we know that Central falls and she has to get away from that, but that's just it. We know that happens. We don't see all of that she goes through to get to that point or whatever.
Yeah. I will say I definitely felt that with Cirilla's storyline. It just felt
it's totally manufactured and a lot of the stuff that she goes through is relatively inconsequential.
Yeah.
It's just that she's going through a lot because we need to see her every episode is the other thing.
Yeah.
Because they're the 3 main characters, we have to see them every episode. Otherwise we forget about them, I guess is their thought. But because Geralt doesn't have a backstory that we want to dive through, but we still have to see him every episode. That's why it's it's just one of the short stories for him every single time while we spend time building up these backstories for the other 2 characters. And I don't know, there's too much time spent doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, when he was writing, I feel like he sort of specifically dodged giving everybody's backstory really fleshed out. In a sense, he gave it to us all right, just take it for what it is. Geralt is this undefined age, but knows all this stuff.
We're just supposed to jump into this world with these people who are already there.
Exactly, and it's easy to hop in and believe that, like, okay, Geralt, this guy, knows all this stuff, and then Yennefer's this witch that knows all this stuff because they're relatively close in age, and they're both old and they've gone through all these things. And it's interesting how in the book we've just started to get a little bit of that backstory that I always want, like the training and the what makes Geralt the Witcher, but we're not getting it through them. We're getting it kind of third party through Ciri, because she gets elements of both of their lives, it's not explicit in the show yet what happens.
Because they're the ones that are teaching her stuff in the book. We can extrapolate that they went through the same thing to some sort of degree, and they've refined it in their own way. But yes.
And I think that's how they determine some of the things for Yennefer, like what happened to her. Like, I know it was talked about very loosely, but Dandelion, what's his name in this? The bard's name?
Jaskier.
Jaskier.
Which is the original Polish name, I found out.
Oh, okay.
The giving him the name Dandelion was something that happened in translation to English, because apparently the English audience was not capable of saying Jaskier.
Yeah. Okay, so like him. Oh man, I forgot why I brought him up, but it's just, I don't know. It's interesting that that's how we're kind of learning about like their backstory and history and like what they went through. It's
almost like the one telling the story of the books is Dandelion, and because he's the one who just kind of comes in, meets Geralt as he is, meets Yennefer as she is, meets Ciri at some point as she is. Like we are Dandelion or Jaskier coming into the story, not catching the backstory because he's not there for the backstory,
and he knows enough about witches and witchers to not need it.
Right. It's like I meet somebody at work or something like that, and I don't then ask him, his entire experience in elementary school.
What's your backstory?
A story might come up here and there. Like I might say, like, "Oh man, like I went hunting this weekend," and then he'd be like, "Oh, that reminds me of this one time back in middle school, blah blah blah," and that's how I get it. But I don't sit down and be like, "All right, tell me what happened on day 1 of 4th grade."
Yeah. I guess I hope I didn't spoil anything for Kenneth, but like I'm sure it was a little evident that Ciri was going to Geralt and that she would probably be trained in Witcherism a little bit. Like I don't know if that was explicitly said or anything, but that was just a theme that I was watching the whole show knowing was happening in the book, And so just watching, I was like, I can't wait for her to show off some skills or whatever. And I mean, I guess that is kind of a spoiler, but then at the end, like her knowing about Yennefer, it's like, okay, well, they all get to meet up. Like, why do they all meet up? And like, I don't know, just the fact that Ciri's mom had all this like magical power, it kind of makes you think like maybe Ciri will. But I mean, Geralt does a spell, so it's just, I wonder what they're gonna do, because I mean, as far as I know, I don't think she really spends all that much time in any like technically school, and they don't know how to make new witchers, so it's like Ciri's kind of in this limbo where I think she's just kind of like, she has this deck of cards that like her mom was this giant source of magical power. She's bound by destiny to Geralt, so it's like, what are you going to do with those cards? And it's like, I almost wish I had asked you, what do you think they're going to do, before I kind of accidentally gave it away, but
that's fine.
Does it? I think that it's relatively evident that she's going to have to train in some fashion.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't really get that impression.
Really?
I think I.
But in this world where like you have to survive, and because and Geralt doesn't care about restoring her to queendom of Sintra, like, and restoring the kingdom of Sintra. He doesn't care about the world politics. I think that comes across.
I guess the way I took, I still understand what Nilfgaard was going, like why they were searching for her. They never said that in the show.
They don't say it in the show. That's another thing that they kind of don't do very well.
So my impression was that Geralt was just gonna like protect her, And it makes sense that he would train her too, but
yeah,
I don't know.
It's they really only even exhibit it maybe twice in the show, but she's what they call a source, and magically speaking, it's about. Like, she's like a conduit of power or something like that.
Okay. You're talking about conduits quite a bit.
Yeah. They don't outright say it, because again, all the stuff that we see with Ciri and Yennefer in this series in the first season is all made up stuff. Is because they don't talk about her being a source until the first book of the saga. So I guess they only could really hint at it in this season. But there's a bit where she's, for the first time, running away from the the Black Knight of Nilfgaard, and she screams and splits the ground.
Yeah, that,
you know.
that weirded me out. I was like, what? Is the
It's
ground
because-
so hollow? It's like magic.
Right.
What's going on?
I think that was supposed to be like an illustration of her having this raw power that she doesn't know about yet.
Kind of like how Yennefer has this raw power behind, like it keeps getting referred to as like the chaos that within her. You know, like I feel like they're kind of showing like, here's her similarity to Geralt. She literally almost looks like she has white hair sometimes, and so I'm thinking like she almost looks like just like him. Not that becoming a Witcher makes you have white hair or anything, but Geralt has white hair. She has platinum blonde hair. So I keep getting these similarities between the two, like her and Geralt, and then her and Yennefer, because like I guess maybe just me knowing she's a source, but then seeing Yennefer having that kind of. I mean, she seems to be a source. Is Yennefer a source? I don't think so.
Not that we've been told.
Yeah.
And we also haven't really been, aside from the inference that being a source is in relation to having an immense well of raw power, or the capability to be able to channel raw power. But even that's not been said.
Yeah,
that's just total inference on our parts thus far.
Yeah, and just the fact that Yennefer's teacher said, like, you know, you're powerful, I can tell, like just from her being emotional.
But
like,
even that's just something that's in the show, not in the books. So, but you know, the other thing is that we've got 3 more books to go before we get more of the source material that could because the people who wrote this script and decided that they were going to create this backstory for Yennefer, and you know, they've read everything.
I was just
so
about
they
to
know
say
the
that.
source, and there might be something that comes up in book 3, 4, 5 that greater informs that idea.
Yeah, that I feel like I'm trying to pick apart the show for little like sneak peeks of what'll be in the next books. You know what I mean? Like knowing what we know from the book, knowing what they're giving us from the show. Like maybe, you know, in book 3 we'll get Yennefer's backstory actually, you know, or maybe we'll get like these little details that I've been just kind of like manufacturing.
One of the things that they talked about in that episode of the podcast that I was listening to today was that the stuff with Yennefer and Cirilla is wholly original.
Okay.
What the heck, dude? I wanted to find out. Okay, so knowing that's wholly original,
I did like
that's
Yennefer's
cool.
story. Like it seemed like she was kind of the main character of this whole season.
I think so. I mean, she definitely has the
arc.
greatest amount of story.
Yeah.
As far as like, you know, starting somewhere, going through something, and getting somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, the main beats of any general story, Yennefer has all of them. Cirilla continues to float, as does Geralt.
Kind of like in Game of Thrones, you're like, why do we have this story about this girl with the dragons? Like, why does that matter at all? And then like 7 seasons later, you're like, oh.
Because she's coming over here.
And she finally made it.
Right.
Spoiler.
Yennefer, on the whole, is the largest fan favorite.
Yeah. And even in the books? Or I guess it's
across everything.
Okay.
Everybody loves Yennefer.
Okay.
I like her too. I mean,
she's my favorite character.
There's really no reason that I found to dislike her in the books so far. I mean, in the show, I dislike her a little more than I do in the books, just because she seems a little bit more crazy with her like power hungriness. And it almost seems more power hungry than it does in the books for some reason. But then later towards the end of the show, it was just kind of almost like a desperate mother looking to leave a legacy almost. And it was like, okay, well maybe that's what it was, but it came off a little bit more, you know, a little different to me, you know, originally.
We're also seeing, you know, relatively speaking, younger Yennefer in the show.
That's the character she played in another show, in her British.
She was Jennifer in another show?
In her show that she was like known for before this one, she was Jennifer, and I was like, oh, that's funny. Now she's Yennefer.
That was funny. But it, like when the saga starts, she's older and more experienced. She's older in this as well, because like we said, we think that she's, you know, at least like 100 or something like that, or whatever it may be. But she's old and has experienced a lot of things. Even just in her first assignment at Adirn, she had that assignment for 30 years before she deserted that. But
did you get that, Kenneth?
I missed that.
There's that bit where she's riding in the carriage with the queen, and she said, I've been at this, she doesn't say this exactly, but she says, I've been sitting at this court for 30 years. I mean, she outright says it.
Yeah, no,
it's kind of a throwaway line.
Yeah.
But and maybe I was looking for the time indication because I knew that she was in the past relative to Geralt's story, and I was looking like, when are they going to give us any sort of a fucking clue? And so maybe I was just looking for it, but she outright says, I've been at this court for 30 years, and it's been just, I thought it was going to be exciting and glamorous, and it's all this,
No, there's definitely a lot of details that they just have those like single lines just
and you don't realize how important.
And it's something that I said whenever we first started covering the show and seeing the pace that it was going at. I was thinking like, this is an interesting directional choice because this is the Netflix audience. And while there might be, some of us that are a little bit more storied with, fantasy and just variety of storytelling and intaking different media, whether it's books, games, TV, movies, whatever, the general Netflix audience just turns on The Office and lets that run for years or whatever, and are not paying attention to anything. And, came up with the fucking phrase Netflix and chill. That's your generic Netflix audience. And I don't think that you can trust them to pick up on the things that they were trying to put across here.
Because that's literally how I watched it. I binged it and I realized I missed so much. Like, there's those small little lines. And it's like, I'm going to watch it again. Cause...
That's something, too, I'm realizing is that, like, you don't need every single detail to enjoy a show. No. But like when Will and I come and we break down the books and the shows, like I feel so dumb. Like I missed so much from the show, but like Will's so good at remembering all these details and catching them and stuff. Like I swear if Will and I both were watching like in the same room with the same amount of focus, we'd both walk away and he'd still have more details than me. And it's just like, I don't know, like it's hard. It's so hard to like try and catch everything when it's just like these one-off lines and you don't know what's important and what's not, and then I feel like I have to go in for the rewatch to actually get it. So like to hear that you have to as well, or that you like to at least,
that's what I like about those, like even Lord of the Rings, like that's I rewatch it like so many times and I catch something new, like probably not now, but I watch it so many times. But
I'm definitely serviced by rewatches as well.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But
I'm not saying you got it down.
I think that is just the way that people intake different media in a, on a personal level. If you, just the way that your brain works, you
depends
might
on your
not
focus,
and for the same reason that like I hate watching most things with other people is because I don't want to be distracted, because I want to be like 1,000% focused.
I got a taste of that the other day, actually. The first time. I'm usually watching The Witcher with somebody that's like full on watching The Witcher with me, but I watched it yesterday and Ace was there and he had already seen it. So he was like kind of talking every now and then. I was like, it didn't bother me really, because like I could, hone in on The Witcher, and he saw I was paying attention. So, like it would stop or I could pause it. But I know exactly. I know what you mean. Like trying to focus and do anything else is like,
that's just my general attitude for everything as well. That's why I prefer to read the books for a show rather than listen to it. I'll listen to it if I've got no choice because I'm running behind or something and I need to get some time in, like on the drive home from work, But
yeah, you don't want anybody else's input, even like the inflection of the way he says a sentence, to change how you think of something. You read it.
I really want to try and get as much as possible as I'm intaking it the first time. And so I think that's why I catch more details, is because I'm obsessed with doing so.
Well, and I mean, just bringing the show to our, chopping block every week, it's like, I guess it's just like reassuring to know, like rewatching it and like, because like I was watching it today and I was like, I thought I knew all these details, and still like they were riding on a boat and I was like, I don't know where they're going. Doesn't matter. We'll figure it out in a second. And then like 2 seconds later, they were at the castle in Sintra or whatever, and so I was like, okay, well, there we go. See, I didn't need to know innately that that's where they were going. I figured that's probably where. I don't even know if I figured that's where they were going, but I just.
But then going back to what got us here, like the show is trying to implement ideas that are not that easy to catch.
Very true. Yeah, and so it's hard. Yeah. So was it easy
for your general audience member?
We're calling you general audience. How is it? I'm general audience too, and I'm saying it was kind of hard for me to pick up, and I felt like I was coming to it to study every week. So like how
pick up on like the different timelines,
all the detail, even the timeline, the details,
even just like that throwaway line about Yennefer having been in court for 30 years.
I thought Yennefer was older.
That was the one I didn't catch, that Yennefer had been, or that timeline was separate than Geralt's. I thought those were on the same timeline.
Yeah,
I think that the 30-year line was a huge indicator of that, but it was just a
just
throwaway
this-
line
yeah.
that you might miss because you looked down to make sure that you were actually grabbing your sandwich and not your coffee. You know, like
Yeah.
that's something that you can miss so easily, and it's the main clue as to them being in separate timelines.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's just
still,
the,
I kind of like it because when you get that moment where everything like connects a little bit, you know, I'm just
There's
like,
the light
oh,
bulb.
I need to go rewatch like everything. I just like, I want to find the little details. Like I was rewatching episode 1 yesterday, and there's who's the girl in the first town, Renfrey.
oh, Renfrey.
Yeah.
She has a line, like a throwaway line, like, on this young queen just like won her first battle, and it was the queen from Cintra. And I was like, oh shit, that's cool.
Queen Clancy.
Yeah. And then they show that battle later on, don't they? Or something.
I don't think they should.
They show her coming out of a
she
battle.
does
coming out of the
righteous.
battle.
Yeah,
I
but
don't
that's
know
when
if it
she's
was that
already
one,
like
but-
established as queen.
No, that's
had
true.
been
That's
established
true.
as queen for
She
years.
mentions it.
Because that was
That's
the
what it was.
betrothal night.
Uh-huh.
And so her husband had already been long dead at that point, you know.
But
Like,
I guess the thing was like they were cutting back before, like between Renfrey and then the queen, who she was talking about, who's now a grandma, you know.
right.
And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like they literally say the queen's name. You could catch it right there if you remember
Right.
her name.
Yeah.
I was
that's
trying
cool.
to catch stuff like that too. Like I mean, Will and I came in knowing a little bit more. So like the first 2 episodes, I felt like I was like, oh, I know what story they're pulling from. Oh, I know exactly what short story they're pulling from. But like that detail, I mean, those little things, like I feel like I should have caught that. And then I was like, dang, I didn't even notice that from the first episode. And I was looking for stuff. But I mean, like we've been saying, like we're all looking for different things to try and I don't know. I always try to let my like imagination run wild. Like Will and I were talking, and when we were talking about how Yennefer is older than Geralt, I was like, wait a minute, what? And Will was like, we've talked about that. And I was like, no, we haven't, because I feel like I would remember, and I'm sure we have talked about it, and I just didn't think about it then. But in my mind, them being a different age does make a big difference. It seems like it would matter, like that if Geralt was older. I mean, and it probably doesn't really, but I let my imagination run wild, and I let it matter. So little details, when I do find them and get that light bulb moment, it's extra like, oh, and then I definitely project like, that's probably why she said this rather than this, and all kinds of things. Like I definitely project and kind of let my ideas go off, and then if they go off and then they connect, I even like feel justified in my sometimes like I feel like I build a kind of a crazy elaborate bridge to connect two things when it's just a bit more of like a straight path there. But I don't know, it's fun for me, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's something that we've talked about several times before across different properties, that the way that you want to interpret a story. And I tend to be a pretty much just like a strict purist, where this is what the author intended, I'm going to take it that way. I look for what seems to be the most pure interpretation of what they meant. Whether it's books or music or whatever it is, that's the way that I've always operated.
Yeah.
And so I do less of that by a pretty big stretch, of imposing different ideas and hopes that I might have for the story.
What do you think about the dragon? What did you think?
Oh, I forgot about the dragon episode.
That's Jordan's favorite of the short stories.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I thought it was really good. I don't remember much about it. But,
it's mostly them walking, that episode.
That's true.
I was kind of disappointed when the dragon showed up, because I was like, man, and then like the second time you see him in the same episode, not like my rewatch, it was the second time I saw him, I was like, okay, he's a little cooler. And then just like every other frame that you see him, I thought like, okay, he looks dumb again, but oh, now he's cool. I don't know. I was super judgy on the dragon. I've been kind of judgy on this show, which I normally am not. Will and I talked about it last week, but I'm usually super forgiving when it's a show.
You're talking about like special effects and everything?
Well, just when a show is being translated from a book. So like with
just how it actually looks.
Like The Shining, I was just like, I mean, I didn't read the book, so I guess that's hard to say. But like Salem's Lot, for example, like we read the book and we saw the show, and I'm just a lot more forgiving. I'm like, okay, well, sometimes they can't do that for TV or whatever. And just for The Witcher, I felt like I've been so judgy, and I shouldn't be, because all in all, when I finished the show, I was like, man, that was really cool. Like, I want to rewatch it. I can't wait for season 2. They left you on a real good cliffhanger, like they always do for the books. So,
I mean, I think my biggest complaint is that like it looks like a low budget TV show.
I agree.
A lot of the time. Some of the times it actually looks really good, but like a lot of the special effects look really bad.
Yeah.
The cinematography was probably like the worst thing about the show, in my opinion.
Mm.
There was a lot of weird shots where I was like, what are
really
they trying
were.
to do here? And
a lot of almost obvious green screen kind of stuff.
yeah, and now that y'all mentioned that most of this is like prequel stuff, I'm kind of excited because that means after this, I think it's going to get a bigger budget for the next season.
Yeah.
Which is where the story actually starts. So
Yeah.
I'm kind
I
of
think season
fine
2
with it.
starts with Blood of Elves.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I think that's where we get now, because now Geralt and Cirilla are together, and I guess Geralt takes her. I mean, ultimately.
Spoilers.
Yeah, sure, fair. That's true. So I think that's where we get into the saga now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's strange to me that they spent an entire season on prequel stuff, which is mostly just short stories.
Yeah, when they could have done it.
They could have knocked out all of that in 2 episodes.
Or they could have sprinkled it throughout, kind of like how we get it. I mean, well, I guess that's not how we get it in the story in the books. We read the prequels, but I feel like they could have sprinkled it throughout just to give us the backstory as we needed it. You know, like if they're trying to show that Yennefer's done everything, even try to get a dragon's heart to have a kid back, then it's like maybe show us a quick little flashback about the dragon and how Geralt and her kind of like even further defined their bond through this weird thing. And, you know, it's just, I don't know.
And to me, it seemed like they were just trying to gauge how the audience is going to take it. Like, are people going to actually like The Witcher?
But they renewed it for a second season before it aired.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, I thumb-upped it before I watched it. Like, before it was even out, I gave it a thumb up. I was like, this is going to be good.
Yeah, like 4 or 5 days before the air date, December 20th, they were like, hey, renewed for a second season. Like, okay. I think that happens a lot these days with streaming platforms, and I think it's a marketing tactic where it's just like, man, this show's so good, we renewed it before it even aired. And just like, don't you want to see it now? And obviously they could take that back if they really had to and be like, well, we said we were going to renew it, but we suddenly have no money or something. You know, they could come up with something.
Yeah. But since that is like my biggest complaint, just like it seems like the budget, and then maybe like whoever did cinematography gets fired, right?
Right.
Hopefully they hire a better one. Like I like all the actors, and like the world that they built so far is I really like it. Like it seems cohesive, and I'm excited for the next season.
Yeah, it'd be kind of
2021.
2021.
It'd be kind of smart if they intentionally, you know, went in to earn a bigger budget so that they could hit the real season 1 with like they call this the prequel to The Witcher, and then they hit the real, you know, Witcher season 1 with the first book.
Right.
Like it would be kind of cool if that's honestly it would be cool if we come back after like 10 years and we're like studying the whole anthology of the creation of The Witcher. It'd be like, okay, that would be cool knowing that they did that, having that be our first taste. I guess it was a little bitter, you know, that it was like, okay, well that's kind of cheap, like cheaply done it seemed like. But like you're saying, I think I'm excited for season 2 because I think they really will pick up the budget. They'll really be diving into main storyline, and it'll still, I think, have the same feel. How you know there's more. Like I think that season 3 will probably be renewed as season 2 is coming out. You know, like right before, just because they probably want us to know that there's going to be more, because each book ends in a huge cliffhanger that it's like, well, of course there's more. Like the next chapter would have been huge. Like it feels like that, at least
The way that the books are paced, it seems like he always knew it was going to be a 5-book saga.
Oh, really?
It's like, this is going to be 5 books, and I'm going to pace it out perfectly for that. There's never like a time that we finish a book, and they're also only like 330 pages each or something like that, like relatively short.
I'm hoping that's what
the pacing's very deliberate, where the pacing in the show is, well, deliberate for weird reasons.
Yeah, and I will say the ending was a weird spot to end on. I feel like I don't know what comes next other than like they start training, but like it just didn't feel like that, and like any closure. You know, it didn't even feel like one of those where it's like where you got to this point and now, oh no, what comes next? You know, it's like what happened to Yennefer, and did Nilfgaard actually beat, what was the place, Sodden or whatever, where they were?
So yeah, Sodden is a location of one of the northern kingdoms.
Yeah, and like the northern armies got there, but we didn't see anything about that. It's like, this is a weird, it felt like it should be the second to last episode.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. There should be a little bit more wrap up with the geopolitical situation.
Right.
It's super odd.
Yeah.
It's an odd place to end.
Kind of feels like that for me though in the books every time. Just
Oh,
like
really?
it feels like a bit of an odd place to end, but knowing there's going to be more. And
at least all the books are out right now. Right?
yeah,
So, like,
and they were out year after year after year, so I feel like
Oh,
they're
wow.
kind of going with the same vibe with this show. You know, I can't imagine they're going to make us wait longer than 2023 for the third season. If the second one comes out in 2021. Which
they might be able to
be
ramp up production after the second season so that they can make it year.
Probably.
It's just this first gap. They might need a little bit of lead time.
They make Stranger Things like every year. And then like even this last one was like 9 months or something. It came out in July instead of
those
October.
kids are growing too quick, probably.
That's true. And it's probably not that hard to film. There's not that many special effects.
And then after that,
as in like
season,
The Witcher, there's like monsters every episode. I guess maybe you could say the same thing about Stranger Things. I don't know.
Never saw it.
You never saw Stranger Things?
No, I couldn't get into it.
It's all right.
Might have to try it though.
Yeah. That first season was the new hotness that year.
Yeah.
Everybody was talking about it.
Well, what do y'all think? Like, all in all, good show? You would recommend?
I think it was really good, and I would recommend it to just about anybody.
Yep.
A far cry from great.
Yeah.
But really good, engaging. I think Henry Cavill is an incredible Geralt.
Now they're going to say specimen.
That too. I like Yennefer. The actress portraying Yennefer, I think that she's really good.
They nailed the like hunchback thing too. Like that was really convincing.
Yeah.
I was like, wow.
And we weren't expecting, whenever we were first watching it and covering, we were talking about that, and we were like, we were talking about that, and it was like, is that just like, is it going to be, because we didn't know what was going to happen post transformation scene. Is it going to be a different actress?
That's what I was thinking.
Like that?
I was like, is this actually like
I figured that it was going to be the same person because you could see that she was a really pretty actress, and if the goal is to go from being hunchbacked and slack-jawed to being, this woman of desire, then why would you change that actress if you can see behind the put upon effects that she's a very pretty woman.
Yeah.
And then also, like, you don't want to just suddenly make it so that you don't recognize one of your characters.
Yeah, it never said either that Yennefer was, like, ugly. It just said that she was deformed a little bit. So, I mean, just because you're deformed doesn't mean you don't have good features, which I honestly kind of just lumped them together, and I was like, deformed, bad features. Like, and that wasn't fair, honestly. And so, like, going back and watching it, like, I could see that she was going to be pretty. And then, honestly, by the last episode, I was like, yeah, she's good. Like, she's really, like... The only thing I imagined differently was just, like, a little bit more curve. Like, just because in the books, she was described as, like, this sexual, seductive goddess almost, So, like, in my mind, not that she's not, attractive and sexually seductive or whatever, but there's, like... I feel like a little bit more, like, obvious, like... loud curves would have been like what she would have done up with magic if it had been, but I mean, how do you do that in a show? And honestly, I still think they did a good job. I just, in your imagination, you can do more than you can in a show. So that's all I did with it, really.
I still like, I can see how they did the hunchback. Obviously that's just like prosthetic
just
stuff.
Like a bump and you stand like this all day.
I don't know how they did the jaw though.
Like her mouth wasn't even on center.
It was like, and then I'm sure they
like,
had something in there too.
Jawbreaker.
Jawbreaker?
I'm just kidding.
Probably something like that.
Just
probably
not
not a jawbreaker.
It always made me think of jawbreakers.
It was, I don't know. But yeah, overall the show, I would say 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10.
Yeah, it was really good. It could have been a lot better.
Yeah, I think possibly if they had maybe like double the budget, it would have been 9 out of 10.
Yeah,
because I think that as far as the story beats, they did great, and I think that really the only thing that was lacking, because I think we all agree the cast was good. Just I think the only thing lacking was the CGI and the effects and that kind of thing.
And then like a solid story, like because it is just all over the place.
Yeah, a lot of the direction was strange.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's true.
But it's kind of understandable because it's just prequels, and I kind of liked it as just one-off stories every episode.
Yeah.
Right.
Now that you said what you did about how like they're building budget for the beginning, I was it's putting it in a new light for me, and I'm like, I like that too now. That would be kind of fun to come back and be like, the lore of the show is that they did the first season to afford the high budget.
Like go watch like Game of Thrones season 1. It's like there's a lot of pretty shoddy
noticeably
sets.
Really? Okay. Yeah. My brother was saying that it was like $1 million per set, like per episode.
I don't
Not
think
per
it's
set,
not to
but-
start.
That's what he's saying
Yeah,
from the
to
start.
start.
But I probably am remembering wrong. So I mean, it could have been
I
$1
don't
million.
know.
That's now what 15 years ago or something like that.
It could have been $1 million by the time I was into it. You know, maybe season 3 or 4 was already out, and then he was saying like, now they're doing $1 million. You know, I just remember it was a very high budget for even the first season.
Thinking about it,
but
honestly, like $1 million per episode is not that much. I don't think.
I don't know.
There's like 10 episodes. There's $10 million budget for the whole season. That's not that
Yeah,
much.
Season 1 though.
Season
for
one.
a
get him to
new
give you
show.
No, I'm just saying, like, I can see them struggling to have really good sets and special effects on $10 million.
Mm-hmm.
For a
But
whole
Yeah.
it sounds
Oh,
like
yeah,
a
yeah,
lot.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
when
like
you say $1 million for the episode, it sounds like a lot.
Cats was $300 million budget. You know,
Did it flop?
I think so.
I think so.
I don't know.
Yeah, I couldn't tell. 'cause
They
I feel like
immediately
the
had
first few things-
controversy with the quality of the production and had to reissue a new version of the movie to theaters.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I think
because you could see like Judi Dench's wedding ring and her real human hands
I think you can see Jason
and
Derulo's
all these other
wiener.
weird things.
Oh, yeah?
That he was in there, right?
I
Yeah,
don't know.
Yeah, you could see his wiener.
Okay.
And they had to CGI it out.
but yeah, there's all these like just really bad things that should have got caught in post production
Yeah.
that they had to go back and then reissue a second version of the film.
Did you see it?
No. I
Oh,
didn't see
okay.
it.
I was about to say, like, how was it?
Yeah, there were weird moments because I thought that the episode with the Striga, the CGI was really good.
The Striga was the...
The Full Test incest daughter with is the King of Temeria,
Like monster
and he has to
crawled around
fight
the
it all
crib.
night.
Yeah, that was all practical effects, though, right? That was just a person in a suit. Right?
I'm not sure.
I think it was.
I haven't looked into that. But that looked really good as opposed to the first scene of the show against the Kikimora that looks awful.
Yeah.
It was anytime that they had to do something to Geralt though to show the effect of his elixirs, I thought looked really good.
That's
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
The dragons looked okay.
What was the devil? What was that? The Sylvan?
Oh yeah, he's a Sylvan.
He looked pretty good.
I thought that he looked good. I think that
Yeah.
that was probably practical.
You practical and then CGI face or something?
Yeah, maybe some effect
The
there.
face threw me off, I think. But
Yeah.
yeah, he didn't look bad.
Yeah, it was like a bit of a digital overlay on someone
Yeah.
who was wearing something.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So there were parts that looked really good, and there were parts that looked really bad.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
It's disjointed in that sense.
Yeah. But I still I loved watching every second of it.
Yeah,
It's
there
like,
was
this
never
is,
a time
I'm
that I
into
was
it.
like, man, or anything.
Yeah, it's,
you know?
it's one of those shows that you're like, it's not great, but it's just, you love it.
Now that I have watched it all the way through once, it will become a background show probably that I
Yeah.
can
Yeah,
have
it's-
on while
yeah.
I do laundry and be like, oh yeah, now I see her saying that she has been at court for 30 years. I missed that every other time. Got it this time.
Right.
What did y'all think of one thing I didn't get was the eels. She turned the girls into eels, and then they're just stuck in the pond
They
forever?
appear to be sources of power for the school.
She said they're
That-
conduits.
I was gonna say that's where I let my imagination run wild, and I was like, "Is this where they become like a metaphorical like hub for power? Because those girls could do magic, and then they turned them into these eels that fell into this swirling Hades pool of like in
Yeah.
Hercules how you had that
Yeah.
pool. Like I just thought like they've got to be like a symbol for like a pool of energy, and then
I
honestly,
think the
didn't
idea
catch
is
that note
definitely
when you
that they
said
become a well of power.
Yeah.
But then who uses it? They said it's just like for the whatever that place is, to the academy or
Yeah,
whatever.
I think it's just for the academy.
But what
It's
is-
probably if somebody comes to attack it or something. I don't know. I was just
well, it's
guessing.
just becomes it's just a well of power
It's
that
just
can be
that
drawn
they grab
upon. Because something that they don't explain in the show very well. They kind of in that first scene where she's training and they have to lift the rock using the power of the flower. So the way that sorcery works in this world is that you're drawing power from something. You can draw it from yourself, but depending on what you're trying to do, that can be very dangerous. So ideally, you learn how to draw the power from the things around you. Something that's explained a little bit better in the books. There's a period of time where Yennefer is telling Ciri how to do things.
I was gonna say, that's one of my biggest complaints, I think, about that. The whole, just the magic. They showed, like you said, just the flower that one time, and then they never show it again, except for the witches with, the magicians with Fringilla, who just like turn into dust. I guess.
Yeah, they
just
expend
spend
themselves.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it just-
But I
Jinx.
don't understand why they don't just use like the trees around them to keep getting.
There's also, and something that
I
we
agree.
talked about briefly in Wednesday's episode for the final chapters of Time of Contempt, but that there is also a moment in the show when the mages are having the council about what they're going to do about Nilfgaard, and Fringilla comes in and says, well, all we want to do is settle our score with Sintra, blah, blah, blah. And obviously they're just going to continue on from that, but, and then Tissaia de Vries is kind of calling out Fringilla, and she's like, we can't trust Nilfgaard, and y'all's practices with mages are, she doesn't say unconstitutional, but like the
against their code,
the Brotherhood of Mages in the North is that there's certain fields of magic that you don't practice, and she says, and y'all do all of that: necromancy, fire magic, a couple of other ones.
Okay.
And so fire magic apparently is sort of given that it costs more, not just that you might expend yourself in the case of what's shown in the show, but it also has other effects that are forbidden because of what those may be. Is I think what they're trying to get across in that, because it's literally one episode to the next. That council happens. Tissaia says, you do fire magic, and we say you can't do fire magic. And then the next episode, Fringilla is forcing the other sorceresses to consume themselves doing fire magic.
It probably helps show too how strong Yennefer really is, because
then she does fire magic,
but it doesn't consume her either. Like it completely consumes all the energy of those other mages, and then it just, she's either drawing on the energy around her so much better, or she has just this innate huge well. Maybe she's pulling from the well. I'm just kidding.
Right.
I think she's.
But I think that well is meant to provide a source of energy for the Academy to use for itself, because something that gets told in the books is that it's kind of falling apart, and so they're using illusion magic to sort of make it look like it's still as grand as it once was.
It's good use of the eels.
Yeah, and so if you can just like set a spell to perpetually tap onto that power to make it look like this stone doesn't need washing. And then also for them to use for training purposes. I think that's what that scene was supposed to be about. It's like these people don't make the cut, and so they become resources.
Dang.
I didn't understand in like the last, maybe not just the last episode, but they kept like, Yennefer kept saying like it's magic, it isn't real. But I was like, it's doing something. Like it is real. But like, why do you keep saying it isn't real? Like it's magic, it isn't real. Like, and then somebody else says it. It's like it's magic, it's not real. And it's like, yeah, it is. You're dying.
Does it ever say it's not real, or is it just like
what do they
saying,
say?
I thought that she just said like it's magic. Or something like she says something.
There's definitely
dismissive about it.
There's definitely a time in the show at some point where she says it's magic, it's not real.
She does say,
and it is kind of like her like muttering as like a thing.
Yeah.
And there are different parts of magic that we find out to be real and not real. Like there's another part in the book where somebody conjures up some caviar, and you can eat it, and it creates the sensation of having eaten caviar, but you're not actually eating anything.
Okay.
It's all sensational.
Yeah.
Of course, they can also pull like a portal of caviar from, like they could portal real caviar in. You know what I mean? Like they could. It's like, why didn't you portal it in? It's like, well, I can make it for you, and then we're not getting any calories. It's like
I think it's also a bit of a philosophical statement on the cost towards their lives that becoming sorcerers and sorceresses has had, where like they've given up things that can very commonly be construed as real, like having a family, having just like a fulfilling life and this and that, for this position of surface level wants, being very good looking, being in a position of power, going to court, doing that sort of stuff. And really, when it comes down to your own person, a lot of that stuff doesn't actually matter. Yeah. And therefore it's not real. I think it's a little bit more philosophical than literally the fire spell that I just cast actually isn't real. I don't think it's that literal. I think it's a little bit more philosophical.
Gotcha.
But which again is like a thing up to interpretation, because it's just a line that somebody says. It's not then backed up by anything. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, anyway, those eels are like bullshit. It's fucking like steals these kids from their homes, right? And then she's like, "You're not good enough. You're gonna be an eel in here forever."
Especially after that one girl catches a lightning bolt in the jar. It's like, I thought she was good enough, and it's like, nope, you're an eel.
Right, but that's like test number 3.
It goes so fast.
Yeah, but the fact that like Yennefer failed so miserably, and then, but I guess she didn't, because she like held the lightning in her body and then re-released it. I don't know. It was just
that's
obviously Yennefer wasn't failing because we knew her that she wasn't going to get turned into an eel just because we're following her. But that's the only reason I knew.
I think the eel scene is more to show one, the brutality of the world. Everything's super fucked up in The Witcher.
Yeah.
Rarely is anybody on anybody's side but their own. And then also, Yennefer is brutal and cold as a character. She falls in love with Geralt, though is it by the wish or is it not, is one of the other philosophical questions that the series asks you. But and she's a character that we're given to care about and is one of our main three characters. And as I've already said, my favorite character and most people's favorite character is taking the whole fan base into account on average. But she's cold and brutal and she desires power and she wants everything. So, you know, but and also, you know, Geralt isn't 100% good. If somebody's in his way, he just murders them. He tries not to if it can be helped, but if they're not going to get out of his way, he just does it. You know, nothing in this world is black or white. And I think that is one of the scenes that helps illustrate that idea.
Okay. I will say it didn't feel like the show emphasized that as much as, say, like Game of Thrones. Like Game of Thrones seems like a much darker, more brutal world than this so far in the show, at least. Which I'm sure in the books and like everything I've heard about The Witcher, it seems really brutal. The show is honestly not like that was probably the worst part in the show. Now that I think about it, was the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, in my eyes, the show, anytime it got super serious, it then kind of nullified it a little bit with like a comment that made it a little less serious. But I don't think that necessarily.
That might be a failure of direction because the books are really funny too, and the games are really funny.
But I never felt like the funniness came in to negate the seriousness. Like when it was
right,
serious,
and that's what I mean by that
serious.
might be a directional problem with the show because it wasn't woven in to the same effect that it is in the books and in the games. Because I think that Geralt's hilarious in the books and in the games, and I think he's really funny in the show too. I think that the handling of the law of surprise in Sintra is the way that he handles it is really funny. He's like, I invoke the law of surprise, whatever you have, blah, blah, blah. And then Pavetta throws up.
Part of that scene.
And he's like, fuck, I guess that means I have a kid now. Because I think that's, and like we talked about, I think last week, I think that's truer to Geralt's character than that scene in the books.
See, but like reading the book and taking that as original source material or whatever, I was like, I took that to be like so important. I mean, we hashed it out last week, but I was like, that was one thing that I didn't like. Like, I thought it was bad.
How did that happen in the book?
Well, Geralt is way more serious about it in the book.
Oh, yeah, it's a big deal.
He's sort of like, in the first time that I read it, I was like, okay, this is implicative of the fact that maybe whenever a Witcher is presented with the opportunity for the law of surprise, he must take it to further increase the ranks of the Witcherdom.
Yeah, because the law of surprise is like hand in hand with destiny, and destiny is the only way you can get a Witcher. Like, it has to be
you have to be
special.
a child of destiny to be a Witcher, generally speaking. Because a lot of the Witcher recruits die,
and that's why
by
there
the process
are so
or
few
whatever.
Witchers, because there are so few children of destiny. So
well, there was also like a cultural cleansing of Witchers at some point that is only very eventually just given very what's the word I was looking for?
Quickly,
it's not given to us with great detail. Even in the books, but there was definitely like a persecution of Witchers at some point. But and in the books, that scene is a little more heavy-handed. Well, not heavy-handed, but a little more serious. And it seems like Geralt is like taking it really seriously. But Geralt's whole character is that he doesn't want to believe in destiny, and he hates the idea of destiny. He sort of hates what destiny has done to him, made him a Witcher that is reviled by society. He believes in it in spite of himself, and all these sort of things. It doesn't. Looking back on it after having, because the first time I was just like, okay, so this is just like a thing that Witchers are supposed to do. But then also he says multiple times that there is no Witcher code. He made up a code for himself that he calls the Witcher code, because saying that you have a code engenders a positive attitude from the people that you're dealing with at a professional level. So there's no Witcher law that says when presented with the law of destiny, take it because we need more. And so looking back on it after having read more of the series and seeing more of Geralt's character, that one scene doesn't fit to me in his attitude towards the law of destiny. His attitude in the show fits more his character, where he's like, okay, if you, like I was talking about earlier, if you're gonna force me to incur this debt from you, then I'll take the law of surprise because that's easy for me to say and it could or could not be anything big for me. I don't care. And then it ends up, oh, fuck, it's a kid.
In the show, he gets Siri twice from the law of surprise.
Also in the books.
Oh, well, I forgot the second time in the book.
It's the same as in the show. He saves that merchant, and then the merchant is taking him back to his home. He's like, well, all I can give you is the law of surprise. And then it ends up that his wife had adopted Cirilla after being found from the druids that save orphans.
He doesn't even accept the law of surprise as payment. He's just like, yeah, just give me an ale.
You don't. I feel like you don't
Right.
have to.
Honestly. Oh, once you say it, it's like it's.
I think it's just destiny defining itself. Like honestly, if he had saved him and he hadn't have offered something, it would have been like it would have probably like cursed him. I don't know. Like I don't think that any of that's probably real. But in my head, like I make it out to be that way.
I think the show has to impart the idea of destiny as being true because, again, they're targeting the Netflix audience. And the Netflix audience as a whole, on average, I don't think can be trusted to pick up on that kind of subtlety, where it being like a question, is destiny real or not? The books can do that because you can say more with 1 minute of reading than you can with 1 minute of watching.
Well, doesn't have Netflix. That's why he talks shit about it.
I see.
It's just the biggest streaming platform in America, and the general audience of America is not ready to think about that sort of stuff.
Oh, I have another question. Whenever, speaking of that merchant, when he's getting healed by the merchant or whoever that lady is, like where does that come from? Like, what did that actually happen or did that not happen? Did he just get better because of that potion?
I don't know what the show's going to do, so I don't want to tell you.
Okay. It was a really weird scene.
It is really weird.
Like Geralt's, like that whole episode for Geralt, I thought was really weird.
It is. It's hard for me to know if they did it right because I know what the answer is.
Okay.
And I can see the clues that they were giving to provide the answer. But because I know the answer, I don't know that it worked or not.
Okay.
I guess you not knowing who it is shows that maybe it didn't work right.
I mean, I feel like it's like his mom who gave him away or something, but okay.
Because they also show that scene, I think to start that episode, right, where it's Geralt as a kid, and his mom abandons him.
Him on the
so I think,
as an adult and then being a kid.
I mean, that's how I took it, but my confusion is more like, was she actually
whether
there?
it
Like,
happened or
who
not.
Healed
I think it's
him,
because she's a sorceress,
Uh-huh.
she can do some sort of spatial manipulation thing, is what they're trying to, allude to in the show.
I kind of thought it was just like a fever dream because he poured the potion on his leg and he was gonna be fine.
No, because after he poured it on his leg, he's like, take me to across the Blue Mountain or someone, like he'll heal me over there. That's what he said right after he poured it on his leg.
Yeah, but I mean,
and that's
he wasn't gonna go. Like
no, he wasn't. But I just didn't have the impression that he was healed from that potion.
I didn't think the Blue Mountain was just gonna be a fix either. I thought he was still trying to go to the Blue Mountain after everything too, right?
I think he was, but
so I just thought that was the next step of his quest. Like I thought he knew he was gonna be fine, and then like him, I thought that was like a fever dream of him getting through it all and getting healed at the end. But I mean, obviously it was we all three took it in different ways, so I don't know. I'll have to.
It's kind of a weird scene.
It was weird.
It was strangely done.
Yeah.
To say the least. But that is his mom, who's a sorceress, which begs another question. I thought sorceresses couldn't have kids. But then I think what they're trying to impart in the show is that the transformation is what makes it so that you don't have kids, because they very visibly take her uterus out. In the books, it's way more ambiguous what that transformation is. It seemed to me like they were saying in the books that once you reach a certain level of magical capability, you can then start to edit things of yourself. Like, okay, well, I know how to set a bone for healing purposes now, so what if I can then implement that to move my bones so that I've got a straighter spine? That sort of thing. It's a little bit, it makes more sense in the books than a surgeon comes in, takes your uterus, and makes you beautiful. It
also seemed very optional in the show.
Yeah, like some witches could have kids and others couldn't.
Yeah.
Some of the others did, because there is a scene where she's talking to her boyfriend where she says, the other girls have such a clear vision of who they want to be for the transformation. She says something like that. But again, that's just another throwaway line. Or a line that gets just said and passed over very quickly. They don't then spend 5 minutes discussing that idea. Right. I think they did that in the show, and it was something that we talked about maybe 2 episodes ago at this point, I'm not sure. But I think that they had it that way in the show so that it would show that the choice was taken from her to be able to have a kid if she wanted. It's something that can be taken from her as a character so that she can then desire it. And I think that was more of a show choice than a canon choice. But it may be something that doesn't even ever get discussed in the canon. So, you know, that might be a pretty easy thing to create because it's never discussed at all.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all wrapped up, I think. I can't think of too much more.
What was y'all's favorite episodes?
Ooh.
Honestly, I think the last one was the best one for me. Just it wrapped it all up in a way that made me really enjoy the show. Whereas I was kind of going in every week a little bit like negging the show. Like I was like, even starting off in the Dragon episode, there were parts that I was like, it's still kind of negative towards. But like everything in that last episode, for some reason, it was just like, it felt, I don't know, even if it wasn't necessarily like super important or whatever, it just felt like it was cinematically more pleasing for me. I mean, also I was watching on Will's TV, which was way nicer than mine, and I feel like that might have made it look a little nicer, but it was just I don't know, rewatching that last episode today and just like I thought it was I think that was probably my favorite.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a cool fight. It kind of culminated a lot of things that we had been talking about, and just like, maybe not that the show had explicitly said or whatever, but it was just cool. I really enjoyed it. So
I think for me, it's either the first episode or the one with the djinn. I don't know why I like the one with the djinn. It was nice. Fun. You know, I like the ones with the bard. I like him as a character.
Dandelion rules.
Yeah, he's awesome.
I love Dandelion. I got scared.
Yeah. And then the first episode was, I think, it had the best fight scene of the whole show, with when him fighting Renfri's minions or whatever.
Yeah, that was really good. The choreography there was pretty great.
That was fucking cool. Yeah.
I liked when that knight cut off that one thing's head and then its arms, and then it kept chopping him to death. And that
and Carol was just standing there like, if we had fed it, it probably would have gone away.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was so dumb. Like, everybody did, of course, but I was just like, damn. All right.
Right, he was just like some loser knight that really wanted to be glorious.
Yeah.
Which informs so much of the way that world works. Yeah. I think that was a really good representation of things that happen all the time, where people are like, oh, fuck the good monsters or whatever. Like Geralt's whole thing in that episode is that he doesn't kill dragons because dragons are intelligent. Yeah. And that sort of thing. He only kills malicious monsters that are sub-intelligent or sub-human intelligence, at least. But then that scenario is like, you know, that is a dangerous monster, but the only reason that it's being threatening to us right now is because it's starving. And if we had just fed it, it probably would have run away because it recognizes there's fucking 15 of us and one of it.
Yeah. Or it would have just gobbled up Dandelion right then. And
but the general populace is like, ugly thing, kill it. Yeah. You know, I think that was pretty well representative of the flavor of this whole universe.
Yeah, of the people that we don't hang out with.
Right, yeah. I think my favorite episode was probably the Strigga episode. That's my favorite of the short stories, though.
That was cool.
The one.
Yeah. That one was really cool.
The guy in the suit.
Yeah.
It's one of the better fights as well, in my opinion, because it takes forever. He fights it all night.
Yeah.
And cool. One of the things that, coincidentally enough, they were talking about in that episode of the podcast that I was listening to earlier today with the people involved in the production, they said that because that's the opening scene for the first Witcher game, is the fight with the Strigga.
Okay.
And it's just a cutscene that introduces you to the world, and now we're in The Witcher, and we're playing the video game. Yeah. You don't actually do it, it's just the opening cutscene. And it's more or less kind of shot for shot the same thing.
Oh, wow.
And they were talking about that, and the director of cinematography or whatever it is that he directs, he very definitely had a directorial role.
Your guy.
He whatever it was, maybe he just directed the storyboards, I don't know. But what he talks about in regards to that was, he was like, in the books, that's the most descripted fight scene. A lot of the times Andrzej Sapkowski just kind of goes through the fight really quickly. It's just like, and then Geralt pirouetted and stabbed and cut this guy down and blah 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 blah. But that fight specifically is extremely detailed for whatever reason. Maybe it was just a fight that Andrzej loved the idea of, and so spend a lot of time doing. But it is also inherently a monster that takes fighting all night to beat, and so therefore requires a lot of description, because otherwise it's just like, and then Geralt fought it all night, boring for a short story.
And there's no really killing it either, because if you kill it, that kind of defeats the point of him going in and
right. His job was to break the curse rather than kill the Striga.
Right.
And so he has to then last all night to break the curse. And so it's the most, at least by description of the writer or the director, whoever it was, who is himself Polish and grew up reading the books, said this is the most descriptive fight in the entire series. And so that's why it looks so similar in the game cinematic as it does in the shows, because we've got everything to go off of as far as the direction goes. But I think that might be my favorite episode.
Okay, that was a really good episode. I'm surprised we all have different favorite episodes.
It's a good show then.
Yeah.
Got us all at different spots.
Yeah.
That's a fair statement.
Yeah.
I'm glad you agreed with me saying that you have a fair statement. Yeah, I am right.
I was just kind of agreeing out loud. Yeah. I don't know. I was just sort of like, oh, I've been agreeing just with a lot of stuff. Just like, yeah.
That's fine. Well, I don't know that I have anything else to say. I'm excited for the next season in 2 years.
Is it really only 2 years?
2021 is all they said.
Maybe.
So, I mean, a year and a month.
Yeah.
Maybe, but maybe a year and 6 months. If they're going to air it at the same time frame, then that's a year and 8 months, a year and 9 months.
Oh, yeah.
Something like that.
That's true.
So, we'll find out. And we'll see y'all at that time.
Yeah, we'll be doing this again.
Well, you'll see us in 2 days on Wednesday with the final episode of our coverage of Time of Contempt, the second book in the Witcher saga. And then with where we're going next, which you'll have already heard, or not already heard, but you'll hear Wednesday. Moving on to a new book. We're done with Witchercast.
Yeah, so this is the last of the 2 episodes a week for now, until
if some other show catches our attention.
Yeah, so like I'll say later this week, just stay up to date with all the shows that we're watching. Like on the sidelines, we'll do anime in a couple months, and
You're gonna do My Hero?
We're gonna do that.
We're gonna do episodes for Boku no Hero Academia and Shokugeki no Soma.
So yeah, catch up on all that, get up to date. Kenneth might come back. He sounds excited. So,
he's nodding his head fervently.
So stay up to date. You guys know how to find us on Instagram and Twitter at ears_stamps, and then dog ears and timestamps at gmail.com. And just let us know what y'all are thinking, and send us recommendations. We need new shows. We need especially like anime. Another Netflix show, so that Will has to get a subscription again. Let us know if Watership Down is good. That's on Netflix. Will loves the book, so that might be fun for us to dive into. And just let us know what you think of The Witcher and everything, and just keep it up.
Anything you want to say, Kenneth?
Thanks for having me on. It's been a while.
It was all right.
It's all.
I always really like having you come back, not only just because we've all been great friends for so long, but just we all three take all these things in so differently. It's really fun, and just the fact that we've all been so close for so long, and yet we all still I don't know, maybe that's why we've been so close for so long, is we all see things so differently, so we complement each other when we get together. But
it's definitely good to have another perspective on the show once in a while.
Yeah.
Do y'all just argue all the time?
All the time. It does. I mean, it does kind of happen. I don't think that we ever get mad at each other about it, but it's sort of like no, or something. Once in a while. It's certainly with me, because I can be kind of an asshole whenever my opinion comes into question.
It's usually just details like that, like the specifically one that we disagreed on a minute ago was the
importance of destiny.
Yeah, and so it's just like little things like that. But I mean, it's not like. Right. It's not like it matters. Right.
I don't then kick him out of the house after the recording is done. But yeah,
that's part of the fun too, right?
You should see us before the show.
Oh yeah,
yeah. It's just burying old wounds and
burying old.
How do you say that? The phrase?
Bury the hatchet.
What was it? That was a burying old hatchets.
Burying old hatchets.
What was I trying to say?
But that's getting over it, though. Burying the hatchet.
What was I trying to say?
Reopening the wounds.
What phrase am I trying to say?
I don't know, man.
Y'all know what I mean.
I don't.
Write in with the answers to Jordan's question. What is he trying to say? Where is his
Hash
head?
it all out, maybe? That's where we hash it all out. Is that what I was trying to say?
I said hatch it. I was close.
Hatch it out.
Hatch it out.
That's
Hatch it,
what I'm
hatch
trying to
it.
Hatch it out.
Hatch it.
And then we bury him. We hatch it out and bury it.
There you go.
That's the
Next
phrase.
to
That's the
a
new phrase.
frozen lake in Canada.
That's the full phrase.
Okay.
We hatch it out and bury it in a frozen lake in Canada.
Dang.
Mm-hmm.
The full phrase. You heard it here on Deets.
On Deets.
Dog ears and timestamps.
Oh,
That's the acronym.
that works.
I'm Will Hedrick.
I'm Jordan Schaffer.
This is Doggers and Timestamps. Go Texans, go Packers.